And welcome back to Nasrec. And of course, it is day 2 of the 55th National Conference of the ANC. And I'm joined now by Samkele Maseko, and it has been busy as we'd expected, Sam. You didn't get much sleep last night. I don't think anybody did, but you, of course, following all of the horse trading that's going on. So let's talk about, first and foremost, the people who are up for nomination and what you can see from the nominations from the different provinces. Now, previously, there was usually, clear slates that would emerge. This time around, not so clear, very fluid. But that, of course, leads to a little more trading than we would have seen in the past.
There's a lot of horse trading taking place, particularly last night after the conference adjourned by the national chair. Lots of discussions were taking place in and around Sandton. Those leaders of the ANC trading with one another. I know the Northern Cape was meeting with a certain perspective aligned to Mkhize, Ntuli and KwaZulu-Natal, trying to iron out the differences between Fikile Mbalula and Mkhize Ntuli to ultimately have one of them contest against Phumulo Moswale instead of a three-way contest for Secretary General, which could dent many of the perspectives that are there and permutations to try and block Phumulo Moswale from entering in the SGO of the ANC. So those whom are aligned to Mkhize Ntuli are waiting for feedback from those who are aligned to Fikile Mbalula. But central to those discussions are the likes of Deshi, who is the Provincial Secretary of the ANC in the Northern Cape, Zamani So. You've got Kwazi Mshengu negotiating on behalf of Mkhize Ntuli, the former MEC of Education in KwaZulu-Natal. So those discussions are at length, but the most critical position that many people are negotiating over is not that of the president, the deputy president position. That is the one that many people are eyeing. For instance, you've got Oscar Mabuyane, you've got Ronald Lamula, you've got Paul Mashatile. It's a three-way contest for that position. Then you've got the dark horse in David Mabuza as well, who's saying, all of these people wanting to contest the presidency position, I'm the incumbent deputy president. I should be the one contesting president. They should be the one contesting deputy president. So you've got him lurking in the side as well, waiting for an opportunity to avail itself for him to slot in. But those aligned to Cyril Ramaphosa are negotiating over Mkhize Ntuli, Fikile Mbalula, Ronald Lamula, Oscar Mabuyane. Then there is Paul Mashatile, which many people are questioning. Where is Paul Mashatile aligned to? Can they trust Paul Mashatile or can't they trust Paul Mashatile? Mkhize was hoping for a nomination in Gauteng through Paul Mashatile's people. Didn't get it. You go to other provinces as well. They were hoping in Limpopo, Mkhize would get a nomination from Limpopo, Stan Matabata's people. That did not come forth. So it tells you that even those aligned to Zweli are seemingly not trusting those whom are nominated with him in his lineup, because he didn't get a nomination in Gauteng, didn't get a nomination in Limpopo. So those provinces, seemingly in the words of some leaders in KZN, they've been taken for a ride by those provinces in order for them to nominate their candidates, but their candidates don't nominate their candidates in KwaZulu-Natal. So that's also the horse trading in with where now Cyril Ramaphosa's people are now meeting with Zweli Mkhize's people to try and see if they can find one another on any of the leadership positions in the top 6 structure of the ANC.
So when you say any of the positions, does that mean that if they can find one another, you could possibly see Zweli Mkhize deputizing to Cyril Ramaphosa?
It depends on the negotiations, because KwaZulu-Natal is very clear that they don't want to walk away from this conference with nothing. And first prize for those aligned to Zweli Mkhize in KwaZulu-Natal is to get Zweli Mkhize in the top 6. And the ultimate first prize is president. But if that fails, one wonders if they can fall for deputy president. Their negotiations taking place now, only time will tell. But what we do know with Dr. Zweli Mkhize, he wanted the presidency in 2017, he withdrew on the conference floor, allowed and paved the way for a two-way contest between Cyril Ramaphosa and Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Zweli Mkhize was at the center of bringing Cyril Ramaphosa back into the political space in 2012 in Mangaung, when he was tasked by the then Premier League to go and speak to Cyril Ramaphosa to come back into the mainstream of politics. Cyril Ramaphosa only signing the nomination on the 11th hour at conference plenary when he was nominated. Until then, they never knew what he was going to decide. And so the relationship between Cyril Ramaphosa and Zweli Mkhize has been very good for a very long period, particularly even when they were in the top 6 together. when they had differences with former President Jacob Zuma, when he fired the Minister of Finance, they clubbed up together. At conference, they worked together in 2017. Going forward, at some point, the president considered making Dr. Mkhize the Minister of Finance. His supporters talked him out of it, ultimately gave him Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Ministry. From there, gave him health, which ultimately led to his demise over digital Vibe. So they've had a good relationship, only soured when the digital Vibe saga came out, and when those close to the president started seeing Dr. Mkhize as a threat due to the exposure he was getting as the Minister of Health in the country. At some point, he was dubbed the Man of the Year by some media publication. So it essentially tells you that those around the president started seeing Mkhize as a threat. But now, looking at the numbers at conference, those aligned to really may be seeing that just like in the policy conference, KwaZulu-Natal was isolated. This time around as well, seemingly isolated, singing alone, other provinces sitting down.
But of course, they can't be ignored as, you know, the province with the huge, the biggest delegation. So they obviously will have sway in this conference. But when we talk about, the position of deputy president, so you've got Paul Mashatile, who, as you say, has now perhaps painted himself into a bit of a corner, because both sides, if by what we are being told and what we are hearing, both sides don't really trust him now at this stage. Would that be a correct characterization of the people you've spoken to?
It's a correct characterization, particularly knowing what 5 provincial secretaries in KwaZulu-Natal said about a month ago leading up to this conference, saying that they are only married to Dr. Mkhize as president, they're not married to any other position or individual whom they've nominated. Questioning Paul Mashatile, where is he aligned to? Particularly when you had them saying that why are other provinces not nominating Zweli Mkhize, but they've nominated leaders from those provinces. Then you had those aligned to to Paul Mashatile going in and speaking to the likes of Bheki Mtolo, saying, no, we are with you. Hence, you saw what transpired at the Provincial General Council of the ANC in Gauteng, where they practically said, no, we note the nominations, we endorse the nominations of the branches, but we are only married to one position in this conference. That is Paul Mashatile, in the words of Panyaza Lesufi, saying you can do anything else in other positions, but just on the deputy president, vote for Paul Mashatile because that is our person. What then raises the question, Gauteng has nominated Novula Mokonyane, who is from this province, as the deputy secretary general. Paul Mashatile. There's Mzwandile Masina from this province. There's Pule Mabe from this province. There's Cyril Ramaphosa from this province. Then you saw Oscar Mabuyane in the Eastern Cape saying, Gauteng has lost everything. Their leaders are all available. Why must we vote for them when they've lost all of the metros and all of the municipalities in this province? Do they now want to lose everything in the country? Which has seen Panyaza Lesufi and Oscar Mabuyane recently smoking a peace pipe yesterday over the utterances, particularly pertaining to the availability of most leaders of this province to occupy these top 6 positions of the party. Hence, you saw the northern provinces meeting after the NEC 2 weeks ago to say, yes, we agree, everyone from the northern provinces is available, we are seemingly uniting, but we can't elect ourselves alone. The southern provinces as well need to be accommodated, in particular the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal, due to the numbers that these provinces have. So they need to get one each in the top 6. But these 2 provinces have the power, if they get one other province, like the Free State, for example, to block any constitutional amendments, because these 3 provinces, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, coupled with one other province, even if it's small, Northern Cape or Free State, they occupy and constitute about 65% of conference.
So that's going to be very interesting. But speaking of the Eastern Cape, now you have, of course, their nomination. And the fact that they went in the deputy president's position, they went with Zweli Mkhize. Now, is that down to the Phumulo Masualle factor? And what does that mean coming into conference, because Phumulo is also vying for a position in the top 6, as is Oscar Mabuyane?
Eastern Cape, for the deputy presidency, went for Oscar Mabuyane. Then you've got a faction in the Eastern Cape of the Amatole region, your Alfred Nzo region, and certain parts of the Joe Gabi region, whom are aligned to Babalo Matigizela and Phumulo Moswale, who are pretty much the generals of that particular Malia faction in the Eastern Cape, and Teresin Tutu, the suspended regional secretary on step aside of Amatole region, and Andile Lungisa. They are more aligned to Phumulo Moswale and Dr. Mkhize. Then you've got about 60% to 65% of the Eastern Cape aligned to Oscar Mabuyane, who is pretty much in charge of the province. The conundrum there, Oscar Mabuyane is the blue-eyed boy of the renewables aligned to Cyril Ramaphosa. One of the last people to speak to the president on the release of the Section 89 report, where it was said he was contemplating resigning, was Oscar Mabuyane, who convened all of the provincial chairpersons who support the incumbent president. And they were the last people to speak to the president. The president was meant to address the nation at 4 in the afternoon in Cape Town. At 20 to 4, he speaks to Oscar Mabuyane after Kwede Mantashe had given up trying to persuade the president. Oscar gets Zamani Saul, gets Mandla Ndlovu of Mpumalanga, gets Zamani Saul, gets Panyazi Sufi, all to speak to the president. They keep him up until about 5 o'clock, 20 to 6 on the phone. 4 o'clock has long passed. Vincent Magwenya goes onto the podium at about 4:30 and says the president is still consulting, still speaking to people. He will communicate in due course. After the presidency issued a communique that the president would be speaking in the afternoon. So it tells you the power and the influence of Oscar Mabuyane on the president. And
but
how,
what does that mean for Kwede Mantashe, who was obviously previously trying to persuade the president?
Kwede Mantashe ultimately was the man who had to do the dirty work, who is still pretty much aligned to the president and is still pretty much the confidante of the president, judging from what happened at conference plenary yesterday when he was defending him against KwaZulu-Natal. You could see the clear frustration and irritation from Kwede Mantashe, particularly even when he went up to the podium and called for security, and how he called Siboniso Duma, the provincial chairperson of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, also with Bheki Cele, to call him to order to go and calm down his delegates. So he is still pretty much integral in the president's core. But on the provincial chairpersons, the main person is Oscar Mabuyane, and the influence and the command that he now has over these provincial chairpersons, which is pretty much the new power block in the ANC, with Oscar Mabuyane commanding more numbers electorally, with his province having a second biggest delegation to this conference that is aligned to the president, with Mpumalanga being the second biggest. So it tells you of the power and the influence of Oscar Mabuyane, that he can't be ignored in this conference, and he has to walk away with something as the Eastern Cape. Many people think Kwede Mantashe is from the Eastern Cape. Yes, it's from the Eastern Cape. But where's Kwede Mantashe's membership? It's not in the Eastern Cape. It's in Ekurhuleni. Kwede Mantashe is a member of the ANC in Gauteng. So it tells you that in Gauteng, you've got about 6 or 7 leaders of this province who are available for the top 6. In other provinces, it's a few. But obviously people will say he's part of the Chris Hani cabal because he is from the Chris Hani region of the ANC in the Eastern Cape, where his farm is in Mkala. But his membership, Gauteng.
So if you say Oscar Mabuyane has to walk away with something, and it makes sense, who is going to be sacrificed?
Then, from the president's perspective, that's the problem. Because you've got Mpumalanga, who have an incumbent deputy president, they can't be ignored as well. So the discussions are very tricky with the negotiations between Oscar and Ronald Lamula. But there is some sort of agreement in place. I don't know what the agreement is, but from what we've heard, particularly on the first night when the conference was due to open, when they arrived on Thursday, the Eastern Cape and Mpumalanga were meeting in Centre, and they were having their own discussions. Hence, you've seen the Zweli grouping as well, meeting and having their own discussions, with Zweli Mkhize uncompromising on Phumulo Moswale for Secretary General. The conundrum there then comes with KwaZulu-Natal, through its provincial secretary, having a very close relationship with Fikile Mbalula. That is where you see that the slate politics are no longer as crystal clear as they are, because of Fikile Mbalula's support cuts across Zweli's support cuts across Cyril Ramaphosa's support. Mdumiseni Ntuli's support cuts across all factions within the ANC, hence the nominations he got throughout the provinces. So it tells you that state politics are not as cut and dried as they used to be, because you are now finding support cutting through all factions, with many people questioning, particularly with Senzo Mchunu. Senzo Mchunu's nomination from the floor. People are saying it's a brainchild of KwaZulu-Natal through their own perspective, saying that if their person loses on the presidency of the ANC, then they have to get someone from KwaZulu-Natal whom they are aligned to, because Mdumiseni Ntuli is not in good terms with the provincial leadership of the party. So what do they then do then next? They get their own man whom they support through their own traditional base, who's not bonded to any other faction and who will be loyal to them because they would have raised them from the floor.
But will Mbalula walk away? Just walk away? I don't think so.
Nobody will just walk away without getting something, because everybody has some sort of ground support. Hence the horse trading becomes so important, that somebody has to walk away with something. If you say, okay, we're not going to give you top 6, okay, we must give you a powerful portfolio in government. So those are some of the trade-offs ultimately that will take place, because if you ask him Mdumiseni Ntuli to withdraw, he's been nominated by about 3 or 4 provinces. He's got the numbers. He spent resources on the campaign.
That's the other thing, the resources spent.
The resources spent, what you've got to offer, and it also becomes important going into the post-conference battles in the National Executive Committee of the ANC, because once they leave Nasrec here, the battle now shifts going towards the NEC and the various provincial conferences that have not set. The Free State is not going to his conference. Is there still the ANC in the Western Cape? Oh, okay. Yeah. They still have to go to their own conference.
But they said they didn't have money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we don't know.
They didn't have money. But also, you know, as we wrap this segment, Samkela, the whole issue of nominations from the floor, the Zuma factor, the Didi Mabuza factor. Didi Mabuza seems to be iced out.
He's pretty much out in the cold, but he's a cat with many lives. I wonder how many lives that are still left there for David Mabuza. But his people were in Kempton Park. They were charting their way forward. We will figure out what will happen going forward for them. But Jacob Zuma, he's no longer a factor that much. Because even in KwaZulu-Natal, he does not command the province. The power of the province has shifted from Nkandla and gone to Willowfontein and Pietermaritzburg. It's Zweli who's a power broker there. But even Zweli being a power broker, there is an individual many people never speak about. He's a sly fox, very quiet. He moves around like David Mabuza. The name of Sipho Hlomuga, the Deputy Provincial Secretary, the MEC of Kokta and KZN. In the last provincial conference, all of the officials never came back. He's the only one who came back. He's the only one. He's the Deputy Provincial Secretary. All of them do Sihlezi, they all lost out. He comes back alone with a new officials team. That tells you where the power in KwaZulu-Natal lies.
Well, still much to talk about, and of course today's going to be the day. Very interesting. The nominations will be made. There will of course be opportunity to raise nominations from the floor for those who have not been nominated by the provinces, and they simply need to reach a threshold of 25% of voting delegates here at conference in order to have their names placed on the ballot. So much still to be anticipated and expected here at the 55th conference.